On this episode of the After the Timeout podcast, in partnership with the IBCA, we speak to Shereka Wright, head women's basketball coach at University of Texas Arlington. We talk to Coach Wright about having difficult conversations with your players, communicating effectively, defensive breakdown drills, and building your defensive system. As always, thank you for listening to the After the Timeout podcast.
So, Coach, we start every episode with what we call the opening tip. We wanted just to have you share with our listeners your kind of journey through your coaching profession, because we always, you talk to all these coaches and you always find the different paths. They're always really, really interesting. Some people didn't think that they were going to coach, and then so there's all the different paths are really interesting, and I think it always goes to kind of show how there's different ways to skin a cat, and you can kind of get to where you're at. So could you share your journey to where you're at now with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, again, thank you guys for having me on today. It's always a great platform to be able to share your story and to be able to get it out to fans and people who may not know a lot about me or the UTA as a program. So I just appreciate you all doing that. So growing up, my dad was in the military. I always talk about that. I was a military brat growing up, and my mother was really, really big on being involved with working with children and adolescents and different things like that and stuff, being in the YMCA. And so I always see my mom mentoring, always wanting to coach and help out young players, young kids that were out there on the floor. So I kind of saw that as something that I was passionate about, she was passionate about. And so one of the things that, I really, really made sure that I kind of harped on when I went to college was to focus on my background with something dealing with working with kids. And so my major was health and fitness. And I played at Purdue University, played for Christy Curry. And one of the things that I always taught to her is that, if she ever have an opening, I would love to, be on her staff. I just enjoy the aspect of coaching and mentoring on women and just being in the business. I just love college athletics. And so I just told her that, hey, ever have an opening, let me know. And when she got the job with Texas Tech, it was a perfect opportunity. I was still playing the WNBA. I was playing with the Phoenix Mercury at the time. And sure enough, I had a major injury, my first major injury. I tore my Achilles. And I just remember just kind of talking to her, and she, reached out to me. At first, it was to be a grad student. And I was like, oh, of course, I'll go back to school. No problems of doing that. And then she calls me back and says, no, actually, I want you to be on my staff as my third assistant. And so dived into that opportunity really, really quickly. But I would have to say more so my mom. She just kind of gave me that platform. I just saw it, and I just love every bit about having to teach and mentor young women. It's a passion of mine. I enjoy it every day. There's not one time where I don't get up in the morning and not look forward to really helping someone.
I think that's kind of why we all went into the education coaching realm. At least I hope so.
Yes, I hope so.
Yeah. So something we've actually never talked to our guests about is the idea of just having those difficult conversations with players. And, you were a player for a long time, and, you kind of have seen both sides of it. So we were just curious from you, being the player side for so long and the coaching side for so long, what are some thoughts maybe for other coaches out there about having those hard conversations with players and kind of working through those harder topics?
Yeah, it's a tricky situation, right? When you're trying to have those tough conversations, especially with 18 or 22-year-olds, like you talked about. I try to use the experience that I was once in your seat, as a player. And I think one of the hardest things is to be able to have a tough conversation when you don't know where it goes. You have emotions that's involved in it. And what I tried to do is to be transparent. I was taught to, our student athletes, our parents, that I'm going to be very transparent at the beginning. And whenever we're having conversations, whether they're good, bad, happy, or sad, those conversations are going to be had. And I try to have a lot of conversations with our players throughout the year. I don't try to have those conversations when there is something wrong. I just try to have conversations when there's good things going on, great things that's happening in your life, because we do try to highlight the positives. I think a lot of times, maybe as leaders, we try to come in and focus on things that are difficult or when things have gone wrong. And so I try to have a healthy balance of that. And so usually when I do have those tough conversations, they know it's coming from a great place. And sometimes they may not be happy with the conversation, but they know at the end of it, I was honest with them. My staff was honest with them. And so it's about life. It's about growth process. And I harp on that in the recruiting process is that, in these 4 years that you spend with me, 3 or 2 or 1, I want to make sure that you're going to be a better person, a better adult when you leave me. And so we just try to focus on that. It's not ever an easy way to have it, but we just try to be transparent. And I just try to make sure that I'm involved in having conversations, daily with our student athletes, so they are building a relationship with me.
So on that kind of same line of thinking there, you just mentioned you played at elite level in college, you played at the highest level in the WNBA. But when you're communicating your message as a coach, right? Communication has changed a lot.
Right.
It was changing up until COVID, and then I feel like COVID changed it even more. So as that has changed, what have you found some of the best ways to communicate with your players? And then how do you encourage them to improve their communication but also helping them understand like their role and their place?
Yeah, a very good question. So one of the things that I've tried to do is try to have one-off conversations a lot more. I think what you're finding out a lot with 18 and 22-year-olds, they do not like to be called out in front of their peers. That is probably one of the things and not even so much peers. I think you have some adults in the same way that do not want to be called out. I mean, you see that in sports right now. And so I try to have a lot of one-off conversations with our student athletes. I'll tell you, one of the things that I did learn from Christy Curry is that we do a lot of goal setting, and we basketball, academics, and life goals. We do those. And when we fall short of those, I try to make sure that, again, we have those conversations one off and not just having it once during the season. Does that make sense? Like we try to have a lot of those conversations. And I do think it does help from that. I think that when you do have that, the student athlete has a better understanding of where you're coming from, where it's not a whole bunch of people around, because it can become defensive. And it does happen. It's human nature to become defensive a lot of times, but I do try to listen. And then what I do allow them to do is communicate back to me. I do ask, how can I help you? What is it that you're wanting to tell me? And to kind of plan for that. We journal a lot. I made them carry a journal where they can write their thoughts down. When they do come to those meetings, they can express how they feel. I do give them opportunities to express it. And I do try to mention to them, but how you address it and how you deliver the message does matter. But I do want them to be able to have a voice and really express how they feel.
I actually love that last comment, because I teach kindergarten through 5th graders, and they're still learning how to communicate. And I say that all the time. You can disagree, you can not like something, but it's how you communicate that message. I wanted to follow up a little bit on your goal setting. A lot of teams say they set goals and this and that, but I wanted to talk to you about your process a little bit of how you help them, make those goals. I guess if you want to use the SMART goals analogy, right? Make those goals realistic and thoughtful and something that they can achieve and work towards.
Absolutely. So, one of the things, and you know how it goes. I mean, Ty, you will have a student athlete walk in. We say, okay, what are your 3 basketball goals? Oh, I want to score 20 plus points. But I also I try to make them elaborate a little bit more on those goals. And I tell them, like, hey, take the time to process it. So what we do is that we just give it to them first, let them take it home to process really ultimately what your goals are. And so we talk about roles too. I think roles are important as well, because a lot of times I think that goals, especially for basketball and maybe potentially for life, always changes, right? I think it's important to put in front of the student athlete, what do we have as resources to help you be successful? And we talk about the life goals, we talk about the academic goals. If they're saying, hey, within this semester, I want to achieve a 3.0, okay, that's great. So this is how we're going to help you achieve that. We try to get them the process to help them get to that. So resources, this is what we have to help you. You have to take advantage of these resources in order to be able to achieve that. Let's not set the bar right there. Let's kind of step up above the bar. You have this bar right here, but let's achieve it above that. So processes of helping them with resources, processing their goals. Because again, I think it's big to elaborate that. I always talk about this piece. If you're going to tell somebody you want this job, or you want to get this, or you want to achieve this, you have to be able to give your background right away. You have to, defend it. What is, again, your basis of saying that you want to be able to achieve this? And so it's been very effective for us. We did it this summer. And what we did was that we came back when the kids finished their goals. Did they achieve them? Did they fall short of those goals? Were they there, but they had a fork in the road where they have to, they veered off it from a little bit. So we tried to, again, go back to that. How do we redefine those goals right now? We're in preseason. So now how do we continue to build on? We keep building on those goals that they set when they first got here. We don't just keep it there. We want to achieve more. And so I think that that's probably one of the things that I think has been very helpful for me as I've learned, right, being in the seat now going in year 4. There's so many things that you've learned that, you try to take and be better from the next year.
So I kind of want to go into a little bit about your role specifically at Vanderbilt when you were the associate head coach. And I think this is something we've never really talked. We've talked to Dobos, we've talked to video coordinators, we've talked to assistants, we've talked to head coaches, but I don't think we've ever really spoken to somebody about the role of an associate head coach. I think we kind of see that role more and more in the college level, the professional level, but I don't know if anybody really talks about the difference between an associate head coach and an assistant coach. So let's just start off kind of with what your role was at Vanderbilt in that role and maybe how it differed from an assistant.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to give you a little bit of background on my position at, Vanderbilt, I had gotten a phone call from Stephanie White and Kelly Kamara, who I played with at Purdue, not with Stephanie, but with Kelly, but obviously knew Stephanie just because of the Purdue ties. And, one of the things that, she talked to me about is that she really, really wanted to build her recruiting base. She really wanted somebody that was ready to take that next step of becoming a head coach. If something, was to happen or I was not around, I was wanting to have somebody that understood the background of being in the seat. And so I think everybody's titles and responsibilities are a little bit different based off of that head coach. And so what Stephanie, White wanted me obviously do, I still was involved in recruiting. So I was still doing a lot of the recruiting coordinator piece, but I also with that was really grooming another assistant coach to be able to become a recruiting coordinator. So I was kind of guiding that, even though that title was still, a part of me, but I was really kind of help grooming that next person to be the recruiting coordinator. Help with a lot of planning, was involved in a lot of meetings that were involved in AD's SWA, anything that had to do with the SEC that she could not attend. I was in those meetings. But also in that seat, guys, you also learn the business side of it all as an associate head coach. I don't think a lot of times as assistants of your recruiting coordinator, I don't know necessarily that we dive into those things. I tell you, that was one of the things I was very, very intrigued to learn the business side of it as an associate head coach. I get to learn a little bit more on the offensive defensive side, but I was just really intrigued about the business because I think that we as assistant coaches don't dive into that. How does this work? How do you make money? What does revenue? Like, we never dived into those things. And so Stephanie White gave me an opportunity to be able to dive into that a little bit more, to just kind of really set that plan outside of the players that she wanted in her program. I really, really kind of tagged that on and took that over as a head coach. I was a head coach in my bucket. She just gave me an opportunity to really see what it would be like to be in a head coach. And I am forever grateful for that piece because she did prepare me to be able to be in this seat right now. And I think, as like you said, but the difference to go along with this, maybe the assistant coaches don't have a lot of those say so. If they're not in that seat, if they're not there, their head coach, they may not be involved in a lot of different things that associate head coach may be involved in. You may be getting more conversations, maybe in more business meetings. You may be more involved in those meetings that assistant coach, that third assistant may not be involved in.
So it's interesting you bring up the idea of being prepared. And Todd and I jokingly like to ask people at times, what was your welcome to being a head coach moment? Because it is so much different. There is so much, even the high school, college, there's so much that goes into it that basketball itself is maybe 10% of the job. So kind of what was maybe some of those things when you first took over as a head coach for the first time that you were like, oh, never thought I'd be doing this?
Well, listen, I think that, I don't know how many head coaches took over a job during COVID. So you're talking about, I could probably write a book of saying, hey, how that first year of mine went, because, you're talking about, I got a job in the beginning of September, and during COVID, not being able to spend a lot of time with our players, didn't, do a lot of recruiting. did no recruiting that first year. So I just kind of walked into the situation. So I had to, it's learning about how the business side of that new institution works. You have so many different things there. You're hiring a new staff. I mean, you kind of have the list of the people that you're going to hire, but it doesn't always kind of work out that way, right? Sometimes it's a location that you wanted to hire this person, but it didn't work out. Being able to welcome staff that was already there. How do you decide whether or not you keep them or not? Because I think one of the things that you always hear from people is that hire the people that, you trust. But I think there's also a fine line of understanding who you hire that is going to do their job. And I think that that's kind of what I kind of learned in that first year is that, okay, yeah, I'm going to hire somebody, hire people that I know and have a great relationship with, but they may not be the best in this position to work with me as a head coach. And so that was a lot of that I had to learn. And then how do I come in and build relationships with players that I have not gotten a chance to know yet? So throughout that whole year, I was trying to build relationships. And that was probably one of the toughest things. Like you said, 10% of it was coaching, but 80% of that probably the time was trying to build relationships and help them understand, like, to try to play for me and go and run through a wall for me. And eventually that started to happen because I thought, for us as a staff, we took time to get to know them.
So I want to pivot a little bit, talk about scheduling, right? If you look at your schedule, you're playing some of the best teams in the country. You got Oklahoma, Arizona, Baylor. First and foremost, a couple questions here. How does that help you? How do you feel that helps your team?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll back up, even before we played them in year 3. In year 2, one of the things that I looked at our roster. Our roster is important, right? When you look at to see who returns for you. And I felt like we had a very experienced team returning in year 2 when we decided that, hey, we want to look at challenging ourselves to play a little bit more. And we added some pieces that I felt was very, very important. That first year we played Baylor, very, very close. Ended up playing South Florida on our home floor and got a win there. But what we looked at is that facility and recruiting wise, we're in a really, really nice facility here in Arlington. And then on top of that, we have a professional team that plays in our building. So I felt like that was a big recruiting piece for us. Why not try to get some of these Power 5 teams to come in and play us? Our fans want to be able to see it. We're in a Metroplex where you have a lot of big time high school teams that are here. It was big for us. It was a big promotion piece for us. So I always felt like that was important to try to get some Power 5 teams to come into our building to play. So, last year, like you talked about, we played, Kansas, I played Oklahoma, we played Baylor, we played Arizona. Did I want it to turn out to be that way? No. The Oklahoma piece kind of worked out because it was a 2-for-2 game where we were sitting there playing. Another team played before us, and we were right here at TCU in the Metroplex, so it worked out perfect. But it's challenging our team. When I looked at it is, and we'll talk about this more, I felt like the transfer portal, I learned a lot about the transfer portal. We felt like we added a lot of pieces, but sometimes that transfer portal, you got to also try to blend players and get them to kind of play and be on that same page. And, I felt like, we did that, but we got challenged early and we got punched in the mouth really too, as well. But it taught a lot about scheduling for me too. And I was like, man, obviously you need to get guaranteed games. You look at that, but at the same time, it's how many of those Power 5 teams you play in that time span. But I felt like our kids, for the most part, were in games. We challenged them ourselves, and we learned a lot about ourselves because we were going into a new conference, and I really wanted to challenge our team at another level. But it was more so just about recruiting and our fans being able to see the best of the best played in our building.
So you just kind of talked about a little bit now, finding that balance, right? You talked about your roster, your conference, how do you go about every year finding that balance of maybe you're going around Thanksgiving to go somewhere and you got a stacked field or whatever, trying to find that spot where you can be challenged, but still be successful and reach your goal.
Yeah, it's tricky. We went to Florida last year, and it did not turn out the way that we wanted to from a logistic standpoint of where we were playing and the teams that we ended up playing. It's usually when you go on those trips, you want to go and enjoy yourself, right? You want your team to have fun, to be able to spend some time together, but at the same time to have a balance of who you're playing. Well, we ended up playing two very tough teams in the Cincinnati and then Toledo, who obviously, again, made a big time run in their tournament. I mean, the NCAA tournament this past year. So it's okay. What do you do now? Like, you would love to be able to host tournaments at home, right? Where you have a chance to be at home, you get your fans to be able to come in it, but it's really important to look at where you do go. I felt this year, we felt like we needed to go to a Thanksgiving tournament where it was hosted by a university. And so we decided to do that this year, going to the West Coast and playing a tournament that way, and felt like it was best for us to be able to do it. But it's hard. I know a lot of teams go in exotic places and play there too, but it also matters who you're playing in there too as well, especially when you're knowing that you have these other Power 5 teams that you would play outside of that. It also too matters what teams were in the NCAA tournament, who were in postseason last year too, right? That's another thing too, that scheduling becomes so difficult because you're looking at how these teams did, what does their roster looks like, and when do you play them, timing, you playing them after, finals, are you playing them right before finals? Like, all of these things matter as you're going through scheduling. It's tough.
Just an interesting follow, just because I feel like almost every guest we talk to now is talking about, I'm moving into a different conference, or we're switching conferences, or we're moving to here, or, just kind of, what are some of your thoughts on just the conference realignments and the conference movements and the just all the different things? You kind of touched on NAL, and I feel like we've talked to many guests on NAL, but we haven't really done too much breakdown of all these teams moving around the country.
Just talking to a couple of my colleagues and I know you guys will talk with one here soon. When you recruit, right? You recruit based off of your conference and what you have coming back. And then all of a sudden, you jump realignment, and now you're in a super conference, whether it's the ACC, Big 12, SEC. You're like, oh my goodness gracious, are we prepared for that? Will we have enough time to bolster this roster to be able to compete at a level that we need to? And so it's tough. You're talking about travel, you're talking about academics. How does all of this stuff kind of play a part? How do you talk about mental health? As that's one of the things that we talked about, our student athletes feeling like they're burnt out, just having to travel across the country and then still be able to study and then be able to perform at a high level. That's a lot that goes into this. Obviously with football, right? You play one game on a Saturday and then you have the whole week to prepare. You're talking about, women's basketball, whether it's baseball or softball, any of those programs like that, those sports, it's a little bit different. You're almost having to play, you may be on the road for a whole entire week and a half because you got to get these games in on the side that you're on. So I think there's a lot that goes into it. I'm not necessarily looking into that right now just because of the WAC. Now, last year was different because we never traveled like this. It's the first time. Well, we kind of figured out how we need to travel now. You're talking about now this realignment, it's completely different. You're not just going, 2 hours. You're talking about almost 6-7 hours that you're flying somewhere to compete. And I think it's just going to be a little bit different how these schools and how these programs navigate all that. It's going to be difficult. And I'll be interested to learn a little bit more about it once they go through it.
All right, so we call this halftime adjustment. So I wanted to ask you, again, your playing career, you had a great playing career. You played in the WNBA, but how do you go about maybe kind of checking yourself to things like when you're coaching the things? Hey, I know this, I know how to do it, but your players might not do it. So breaking down a skill for them in a form where they can understand it and learn it, where in your head you might be like, yeah, I know how to do this.
Yeah. And I tell you, it was something that I had to really truly learn, because at first I would tell you I was coaching like I was playing. And so for me, playing for me is that, again, being aggressive, right? Not having no fear. I'm just attacking it. I'm doing all of these things. I understand angles. I understand all these things in my mind, but how I was thinking it and coaching and saying it was not, again, really registering with our players. And I got to see these puzzled looks on their faces. And so kind of made me kind of really, really slow down and say, okay, it is step by step in breaking things down. So one of the things that I do try to make sure that I do a better job of is on the floor, walking through, moving as I'm coaching, having our players move as I coach. Instead of talking and letting them watch, it's very difficult for them because we do have kids that are visual learners, right? We are teachers, we are. And so in the classroom, I do try to ask a lot of our academic advisors and, professors, if they don't mind, how do you teach? What do you feel like there's some of the best ways that you've helped your students learn? And it's been very good for us the same way to be able to do it. So we walk through a lot of different things. We go through it probably multiple times. Once we go through it, we go right to a breakdown. And so I think that has been very beneficial for our players. If we're working on, anything as a pick and roll, walking through it as part of our set, we're going to go and break that down. And we're going to get shots out of that. And then we start to build it up to the point that they truly understand, okay, now I know what we're looking for. I know we have options. So it's about a process of breaking things down, walking through it, speaking through it slowly. And then do they have questions? I try to make them go through it and make mistakes first. And then we come back to clean those up because I don't want them to be robotic. I do not like players that constantly look over to the sideline all the time to me as a coach. I want them to be able to make plays off of instincts. And that seems to be very beneficial for us.
So just to follow here, I like that walking through. So when you're walking through, say you use the pick and roll example, you're walking through your pick and roll, kind of take us through that step. What, obviously you're setting up the ball screen, you're talking about the screener, then you have the read coming off the screen, whatever, and you said you're building up to it. So kind of take us through that process of how you're kind of teaching that. Cause I think it's valuable for coaches because coaches are always looking, we have all these great plays and these concepts, but then it doesn't come into fruition with the decision-making and the reads and how to actually do it.
Yeah, so it's kind of hands-on. I'm actually walking my player through it also. I try to use visual, keep it in mind to think about if you're in the game setting. So you're out here playing, this is the game setting. Show them defensively, how is this person defending this action? So we will actually have one of our practice players that are involved. Let's say that the practice player is hedging the screen. And so we would have our practice player show that. We kind of have them coming off, and then we would show them what we're looking for. It's a walkthrough process. It's kind of, I'm touching them and hey, we're talking through that process. We're actually showing them what the defense would be doing, why we want this option out of this. And so we just kind of walk them. I'm just walking with them. A lot of times I'm dribbling the ball. I'm like, hey, you walk behind me and see me. And so that's been really good because they're not standing at the side because, again, a lot of times, we got 18 and 20-year-olds who'll still be, chasing a butterfly over here on the side, or somebody's over here talking and like, hey, did you just hear what I just said? And no, they just missed it. And so I have them involved, walk with me, behind me, right, to be able to see the action. And they actually like that. And they pick it up because they can actually see the whole floor. A lot of times, this happens. Players focus on what they're doing and not where everybody else is doing. So we really try to help on the whole floor. This happened because this happened over here. And so we really walk through all of those options and having them walk through it first before we go at a pace, full speed. And it's been beneficial for us.
So we really want to now, the second half of the show, we always kind of break down a specific topic with our guests. And for you, as Todd and I did our homework a little bit, when you guys were in the Sun Belt, you had some phenomenal defensive statistics, whether it was allowing 54 points a game, opponents shooting under 35%, overall under 27% from three. So with you, we kind of just wanted to maybe build our defense up. So kind of starting with some skills stuff and then build it up to maybe how you assess. Yeah. So to start in a kind of a two-parter, when you're guarding the ball, what do you want your team's cues to be? Are you trying to shade a specific way? Are you trying to influence the ball a specific way? Are you looking to give a step and contain or be a little bit closer in pressure? Kind of break down what you're looking for on the ball from your team.
Yeah, first and foremost, one of the things that I do challenge my teams every year is to take pride in being able to guard your man. I think that's the first thing is that because team defense comes along with everybody doing their part first, and it's also them understanding who you are. That was one of the things that Katrina Merriweather taught me about when I played, and she used to always tell me, "You play like you're 5'5", 5'6". And I never really understood like what she meant by that. And I understood she's like, you have length. And so you don't necessarily have to play as tight on a player. You have to play smart and use your length. And so I took that and I thought that was very important, where I have a 5'5", 9'3" who is on my team is not going to be the same as, an Ari who is, 6 foot that can give a little bit more space and play with her length and do those things. And so we take pride in guarding the ball first. The second part of that is that we force everything to a push point, to a baseline. We feel like all of our defense, our help is towards the baseline. We try to really keep things out the middle. It's, for me, the philosophy is that if it gets in the middle, it breaks down your defense. I feel like you give the offense so many options. When the ball gets in the middle, the floor opens up a little bit more. Where we push things to the side, it shrinks the floor. And so we like that piece. We know we have more help going that way. And so we force balls to the baseline side, push points. We really force to try to keep the ball to the baseline and to the side. We don't overhelp. I think one of the things is that we have push points to them understanding when it's to come and help. We react. We are constantly moving. We're constantly talking. Head is on a swivel, as we all talk about. I think our kids love that piece. And we challenge everything. We challenge every shot. Doesn't matter whether it goes in or not. Everything must be challenged. And that's one of the things we felt that, and not fouling. We just want to challenge and being smart. And so that year when we had that, we had great size, from top to bottom. You're talking about a point guard who's 5'10", 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2". Like, we had that. And so we could change up our defenses a ton. We could switch a lot of different things. And I felt like that was really beneficial to us. But it started from forcing things to the sideline, being active, and challenging every shot that went up.
So kind of let's dig a little bit deeper now. And you kind of just talked about challenging things. So let's look at the closeout. What are you looking to do specifically in your closeout? We talk to coaches, it's a one-hand closeout, it's a two-hand closeout. Sometimes it's always a specific hand. Sometimes it changes per what the person they're closing out, what side they shoot on. Kind of what are your teaching points when you're looking at a closeout on a rotation?
Yeah. So funny thing is that we base that off of personnel, right? Based off of that player. And so we use these names from players that we know in the league. So we have a rondo closeout. Rondo closeout is a driver. So we know that those closeouts are short with a high hand. I don't necessarily care which hand it is. I don't care if it's two or if it's one. I think it's based off of your balance to be able to chop your feet and stay in front of a driver. Two, we have a Maya, who a player that could do everything. They could shoot the three, they could put the ball on the floor. Maya, obviously Maya Moore was big time, being able to score everywhere on the floor. And so you just got to be prepared and locked in to be able to defend all three of those areas. That player is a 3-level scorer. And so you got to be able to close out with a high hand with space and be able to defend the three. And then we have a Curry, that player that can flat out shoot the three, as we find out a lot within our league. We have a lot of Currys. And so we're over closing out. We're running that person off that line and we run them off, and we want them to put the ball on the floor. They're having to dribble the ball to help. And so we close out tight without fouling. We are saying that they are not to get a shot off. We want to overplay that and run them and put them on the floor. And so that has worked good with us. That's kind of what we've got to this point now. What we're teaching, we do a lot of closeouts, and we do it based off of personnel. So when we do start doing scouting, they understand we'll put a Rondo, we'll put a Curry, we'll put a Maya in there. And so they understand that player, they know what that player does, and they know how to defend that player. And it may be certain things we may say, hey, but we want to, keep them forced left just because we feel like their left hand is weak. But they know from that, based off of those closeouts and what the names we've given them, they know exactly what they're doing on that personnel.
So you just talked about a little bit your 3-point shot defense, right? Running them off. But I'm gonna because you kind of answered a little bit, so I'm gonna add another fact. You talked about not over helping, right? So when you're doing those breakdowns and those live things, kind of, maybe you have a shooter on the backside. What are your key points for them? Are they not getting to that midline as much? Are they cheating out? Obviously, it's personnel based, but how do you kind of help them to not overhelp? Because it's just a natural tendency. I'm watching the ball. This person's driving. I'm going to go fly over there, and then in the corner, this knockdown Curry is draining threes on us.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's more so it's a communication piece, right? I want our players to communicate at a high level, and it's a read, and that player's defending that person, and they're getting beat. They're calling for that help, right? They're talking. But like you said, if I'm that person that's in helping low I, and I see that this player, I can see off my peripheral that this player has gotten by my guard, by my teammate, that I got to go help. And then it's important for the backside, right? That head is on that swivel to know, hey, listen, that again, if we're having to, again, react and we're having to, again, help, we got to be able to move to the next spot. And so we break those different things down. We're saying, okay, this person is beat. We know we can see how this person is beat. So we're working on showing those different things when they're not. And then again, it's just a read, right? And like you said, sometimes it's going to happen, sometimes it's not. But if I'm having to, again, I got to help and I got to scramble to the next player, it's going to be important for my teammate to know what that player does. If that's occurring in that corner, you're going, personnel already. And so it's important for all five, everybody to know on that floor what each player does very well. And I'll tell you, that year that we went to the NCAA tournament, and we won the Sun Belt, all those players that were on that floor knew personnel. And they were willing to help their teammate. We were aggressive on the ball. We were flying around. And so a lot of times when that happens, good things happen for you. You got your hands up, you may get a deflection. It made teams play faster than they wanted to play. And so, we were just very good at that. Very, very good that year.
So we kind of talked about the perimeter. So now let's just quickly talk about the post. Yeah. What are things you're looking to do in the post to kind of take away a bigger player, a more physical player? Kind of like I asked with the perimeter, are you looking to guard from a specific side? Are you looking to influence to a specific spot? Kind of what are those things you're doing to kind of limit that bigger, stronger post player?
Yeah. So we, one of the things that I talked about in the scheduling pieces that I wanted to play some teams that challenged us. And we obviously that year we played. Last year, we dealt with some bigger post players inside. And so we had a number of different things that we looked at. We probably played a little bit more zone. We played more 1-2-2 zone, where I felt like our team was much better than being in a 2-3. And I felt like it was better to be able to double on bigs that we felt that had an advantage inside for us. We were not very big last year. We were just very athletic inside. We had length. And so we basically, for the first time, obviously we 3-quartered on the top, and then we brought help from the baseline side. I tell you guys, I changed that. Actually going into this year, I looked at it and I was like, I don't know how many post players can finish. And a lot of them like to be on the left side of the floor, on the left block, to be able to turn over their left shoulder to score with their right hand. I know we have a lot of post players that like to be able to turn over their right shoulder. You don't get a lot of them. A lot of them turn to their weak hand to be able to score. And so, and a lot of action is ran on that side. As we looked at it and we scout, we saw a lot of that. Their post players, or dominant post players, are playing on that left block to be able to turn over that shoulder. So we started to now play on the baseline side of 3-quarter and bringing help from that nail, from that low eye, to be able to double off of that, especially when we feel like those post players that are dominant and we have to double. We started fronting a lot. We do switch a lot, 1-4. Sometimes we may potentially switch 1-5 if we have the lineup that we can feel like we can do that. In that case, we will front a lot. We will front the post to be very physical, to force tougher passes over the top, where if those posts are catching the ball, they're catching it underneath, where they're not in a scoring threat piece of it. So we do a number of different things. We're going to try this out. This 3-quarter from the baseline side is something that we're going to try and see. And I think we will play the percentage to see how many post players can be able to score with their weak hand.
And then kind of, you kind of already talked about it, you're kind of driving them towards the baseline, but what are some other things you're doing to try to influence the other team kind of out of the middle, out of the paint, limit those paint touches, to kind of help your defense not have to maybe rotate as far?
Um, Probably looking to trap more a little bit. One of the things I've kind of watched a lot in the WNBA, I try to watch a lot of basketball, and I've seen a lot of teams trapping more and more, just to, again, force players to be able to play and scramble, not being used to running their sets. And so that's probably some of the things we'll probably look at doing a little bit more. We may look at icing the own ball, not allowing the own ball to come off now and keeping it more to the side, and maybe trapping some more of that. I always talk about really shrinking the floor and not giving offense a lot of options, the offensive player. So we may look at doing a little bit more of those things. And that takes time, right, to really focus on that. And we will do that. And we actually kind of started doing a little bit more of that now. What we call pick and roll habits, and we will break those things down where we have different actions, how we're guarding the own ball. And so I think that's probably some of the things we'll look to do a little bit more of, is really trying not to allow people to come towards the middle of the floor and really trying to keep it to the side.
So before I wanted to get into like overall defensive metrics and stats you use, but you mentioned this is something that piqued my interest because you mentioned post players struggling at times to finish weak hand, right? Most of the time, left hand's weak hand, right? Have you found that also with just defense in general, that left side of getting players maybe trying to keep that on the side? Because me and John talk about this all the time. Like, I would love, to try to keep somebody on that left side, especially the lower levels. You get high school,
Right?
Even D3 where I coach. I look at the shot charts and I'm like, well, nobody most of the 85% of the offense is on that right side, right? You enter to the right, you start it over there, you get shots over there. So you kind of find that translates to perimeter as well on that left side.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's the same thing. How many, if you look at it, I tell you, and I'll challenge you on this too, Todd, how many offenses have started on the left side of the floor, even though it makes sense, because I tell our kids this all the time, you're going to be coming off to your right hand. You hardly ever see an offense started on the left side of the floor.
Correct.
And I find ourselves a lot of times too, our coaches, when we break down, we're going through an offense, we put a new one in. And as I'm sitting here talking to you, I thought about this the other day. We were putting in one of our transition of secondaries, and we never went to the left side of the floor hardly. We
side entry.
It's like we were on the right side of the floor. And so you don't find a lot of players because it's the weekend. That want to go left side. Now, you do have some players that love to finish with their weekend. I had a former player of mine that everything that she did, she was right-handed, dominant right-handed, but wanted to finish on the left side of the floor all the time. But that's a unique scouting piece that you get to see of a player. And so we will try to do that more as you did it. So as I go back to practice next week, I'm going to make sure that our staff focuses on the left side of the floor, because it's teams, I'm telling you, on transition breaks, anything that they're doing, it's on the right side of the floor. It's either a kick up to the right side of the floor for a post speed, right? It's a handoff, DHO. It is a lot of times it's on the right-hand side of the floor.
So then let's go back. A lot of times you're out there and you're like, the eye test says, oh, my defense is doing well, right? But what are those metrics you use in stats? I when I was coaching this year, I looked at a lot of different things to say, okay, well, we think they're doing well, but maybe this individual player isn't doing as well as we thought, or as a team, we're giving up this too much. So kind of what are those stats you use to kind of help you're being successful or not, and assess what you're doing?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, for me, it's you have a benchmark of where you really want to hold your teams. I always feel like if a team can get to, and I'm just using us, if a team can get to 80 points, they're pretty much going to probably win a game. Like it's just too tough to beat a team unless, both teams, like you're a high octane team. You don't care if a team can score that, because you're going to score those points. And so for me, when you look at it and I go into halftime, one of the things I'm looking at is transition points. How many points are we giving up in transition? So we look at that piece and we're saying, hey, we've given up almost 15 points already in transition, and we've done a good job in the half court. That's where they're coming. That's a lot. We've got to make sure that we're getting back in transition. Free throws. How often has that team been to the free throw line? Have we put that team on the free throw line in the first half, double digits already? That's another problem. We're fouling too much. That's another thing. We're doing a good job in the half court defending, but we're bailing them out with fouls, or we put them, in the bonus. Like, those are the things that we look at, because I think that those things are critical, because again, we're not defending that, right? We're not defending at the free throw line. That's free money. That's free money. I always call it for them, to be able to do that. But transition, and then being able to, get to the free throw line. And then you talked about 3-point shooting. That was one of the things I feel like we did not do a very good job this past year of defending. I think we were at the bottom of that because, again, we just were not, teams shot the ball very well in the WAC conference. That was one of I think our common strength was shooting. And so we were giving up almost, double digits at times in 3 points. That's a game for you already, is being able to knock those shots down, because it opens up the floor for you. So I would say that those are the 3 areas that I feel like we need to look at, especially when you're defending, you think you're doing a good job, but those areas tell a lot for you.
So as we go into our last 2 segments, the first one we call 30-second timeout. It's kind of our guest platform to kind of talk about whatever they want to talk about, whether it's their program or something they're doing or their family or their friends, or lately people have been asking Todd and I a question during this time. So it's kind of your platform, roughly 30 seconds. There's no referee in your timeout telling you that your 30 seconds is up, but it's your platform. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm going to use this platform just to be able to talk about just mid-level basketball and us telling our story. One of the things that I've always been intrigued with is that when you watch the NCAA tournament on the men's side, and there's always an intriguing story about a team that you've never really truly heard about. And I feel like they do a very good job of talking about those teams. I feel like now on the women's side, we're starting to get a little bit more about it, because every year there's always a team at the mid-level that pops up that is like, man, this is a really, really good team. Because we hear all the time about these Power 5 teams, right? We hear about them all the time. I think it's important for us to continue to use these platforms that you guys are giving us right now, and giving me, to be able to tell the story, to be able to get that out to our fans, because I feel like there's tons of great mid-major programs, especially on the women's side, that we need to continue to talk about and have coaches get on these platforms to talk about their teams and to promote that a little bit more, because it is here, and you can play at a mid-level and have a great successful career there, and go play at the highest level and do very well. And so I just think it's important to be able to do that. I never truly understood that as a Power 5 assistant, for so long, until I actually got here, and then to be able to have a platform and go play in the NCAA tournament. And so I just appreciate you all doing this, because it is important to be able to tell both sides and tell a story. Women's basketball is about storytelling, and I feel like we have a lot of stories to tell for that.
No, most definitely. I end up watching getting to pick up. I just watch basketball all the time, so it'll be late at night or whatever. I'm turning it on. And there's so much good basketball that doesn't get good players, good coaches, everything.
Yeah, parity. It's parity is here. It's parity in the women's game now. And so I'm just excited to be able to say that I've been at all levels to experience it for the most part. And I think that everybody has something that we can learn from, whether that's from the NAI level, Division II level, the JUCO level, high school level. We all have things that we can learn from each other, and it's important.
All right, last segment, quick hitters. We're gonna throw questions at you. Answer them any way you want. Kind of all over the place, having some fun.
Okay.
First one, your best type of barbecue.
Oh, probably brisket. I'm a big brisket fan. I would say ribs, but now I've been on this kick with this brisket. So I would say slow cooked honey barbecue brisket.
Oh, sounds delicious.
Now I'm hungry. All right. So Todd and I love to do our homework on our guests. And when I was researching some things with you, I found in high school you scored 3,269 points. And there's actually only 36 players in the history of the U.S. that have done that. So first of all, shout out to you, Coach.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Fun fact.
There you go. So here's a great question to lead up to that. What was your favorite place to shoot from or score from?
Ooh, around that rim. Oh, I loved being around that rim. I loved the contact. Now, at that time, probably a $105, 110. I was a skinny thing out there playing, but hey, I welcome contact. It was something to finish around that rim and different ways of finishing at that rim. It was something big for me. So I would say finish around the rim and then getting fouled and going to that free throw line.
All right, same kind of thing. You had 10 total losses in high school. Which one was the toughest?
Can I say two of those? Because two
Sure.
of those came, from Mansfield High School, from Aaron Grant that, obviously is coaching now at West Virginia. Mansfield was a powerhouse here. In my last 2 years, I lost to Mansfield, having a chance to go to the state tournament and then to turn around and lose again to her both times. And that was a situation, a Hail Mary at the buzzer piece. To go in overtime, and the second time just again. So I would say both of those were tough for me, and it came from the same team twice. So I think I would say that one.
All right. So, you grew up, you went to high school in Texas, but then you kind of moved around the world, or the US a little bit. You were at Purdue, Texas, Alabama, Vanderbilt, Phoenix, Detroit. What was something you missed that's underrated about Texas?
Oh, the weather. The weather. When I thought about this wholeheartedly when I committed to Purdue, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go up to Indiana. I didn't really notice it until I got, my freshman year. And at the time, we didn't go to summer school. Like you went there in the fall, like you got there. And boy, September hits and it's cold. It's already like you're having to pull out, your puffer, coat. And I'm like, I'm not used to this in Texas. And I didn't see the sun until like almost March, April, like when it's kind of warming up. I just kind of like, man, I really do miss Texas. I miss the heat. I miss the weather. Not to take away, I loved my career there, but it was just cold. And then where we played at, all the schools we went to, you saw snow and snow and snow. And then I'm getting my car stuck in snow because I can't drive. I'm used to driving right in Texas. And so I just really miss the weather. I love it. I love the weather here.
I'm sure as a freshman, you were looking at those crazy Midwesterners when it was 50 out wearing shorts and t-shirts. Like, what's going on with you guys?
Yeah, they're
joke about it all the time.
They're in flip-flops. And I'm just kind of looking at them like, man, I'm a little cold right now. And, got on a sweatsuit and they still got on shorts and maybe a long sleeve. That's it. And flip-flops. And
windows open, driving the car, Yeah. It's all
arms just hanging out the window. They're just enjoying life. Great weather.
All right. You got to pick one meal. You can only have one meal to say today. Would it be breakfast, lunch, or dinner?
Oh, dinner. I'm not a big breakfast person. I usually skip lunch from time to time. So dinner. And that's usually kind of something I'm looking forward to. I'm a big pasta girl. So anything that I can, spaghetti, Alfredo, I love it. That's what I want.
I'm right there with you. It's usually because I forget my lunch at home. It's sitting on the counter. I get a text. Forgot your lunch. Huh, I'll get something to eat lunch today then.
Mine's just usually because I don't have time. All right. The next one is that, and I actually am going to add one right at the end because I think this one will be funny. But for this one, toughest defender you played against that guarded you?
Oh, probably Tanisha Wright. That's now the head coach for the Atlanta Dream. She was at Penn State. We had head-to-head matches. I just couldn't stand. Her. It's very physical with me. We talked a lot of trash to each other. That was always a fun piece of it all. But I mean, even when she went into the league, she was probably known as one of the, the best defenders ever. So I would say Tanisha Wright.
I was really trying to work in a joke about two rights not making a wrong there, but I just couldn't think of something. All right, last one. This is definitely a fun one because I talked to Coach a couple times this week and she's been wonderful. What's a good Christy Curry story that you have?
Oh gosh. We have so many of them. But I would have to use this one. And this is when I worked for her because it's always like, when you play for, I mean, it was always just her accent. Everybody made fun of her accent. That was always a big deal because she's from the South, but she's so sweet. And people used to say a lot of times, how can you get mad at her because of the accent? She's just so sweet. But we just had a number of times. I think the funniest thing for me is that when we went on recruiting trips, I mean, she was like, hey, I'm going to help you drive. I'm going to stay up and help you. And we'll get riding, and I swear to you all, guys, I look to the side and she's just knocked sleep out, not helping me on the drive. And I'm just like, okay, you're supposed to be helping me along the drive, but that was just her time. I'm going to help you, Reek, you let me know. I'm here to help. I'll help you drive. And I'm knowing like, no, if I let her drive, we'll probably be on the side somewhere and not making it home. But she was always funny with that piece. She was always willing to drive. I don't have a lot of funny stories about her, but I think that main thing is that she never really helped drive. She was always asleep on the passenger side, always.
Well,
Always.
Coach, thank you for jumping on with us and giving us some great teaching points to pass on. And I guarantee our guests learned a lot, and we also had some fun in this episode. So thank you for your time.
Thank you all so much for having me on. Like I said, we appreciate the platform. And if there's anything I can ever do for you guys, just let me know.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast in concert with the Illinois Basketball Coaches Association. Please remember to give us a 5-star rating wherever you may listen. For more show content and upcoming episodes, follow us on Twitter at After the Timeout and subscribe to our podcast for upcoming episodes. Thank you for listening.